A long time ago, there was a large and frightening woman named Madame G, as her customers called her, because she sold the best meat soup. Her food was always fresh, and the best in the market. Every market day, she would arrive with her large cooking pots. She spoke to no one. Quickly, the villagers gathered around her, and soon her dishes were sold in the blink of an eye. As soon as she had sold all her affordable food, she quietly left with her empty pots. The villagers wondered how this large woman could cook and sell such delicious soup at such a low price, that even beggars could afford to eat to their fill. Most of these pieces of meat were so large that they could be kept until the next day at a minimal price. Most of the food vendors were envious of her. I wonder how she makes a profit from her cooking. It's insane, with the cost of things. She must not live in this country to sell her food so cheaply. She has already taken all our customers, replied a lady in a bitter voice. Every Sunday, there was always a missing child, either in the neighborhood or at the market. But most of the missing children were often abducted at the market by God knows who. The villagers could not solve the mystery because the love that always prevailed among the village inhabitants made it impossible to identify the culprit and their true intentions. It didn't bother Madame G much because she rarely spoke to people except when her clients came to buy from her. Despite her cheap food, she had an attitude of ostracism, an appearance of do not disturb me, and always kept her distance, not mingling with the other women. The children found Madame G intimidating and strange because every time they played football and their ball accidentally hit her pot of soup, she would scream in rage. Most of the time, Madame G punctured their ball with a knife, making the children at the market cry, who would then complain to their parents. The village children never dared to disturb her, especially when she was cooking or present at the market. Meanwhile, one girl in particular named Amina noticed how grumpy and mean Madame G was, and yet how people kept buying from her despite her bad behavior towards the villagers. Amina decided to follow her when she finished her day of selling. One evening, when Madame G had finished her sales for the day as usual, she immediately closed her stall, took her pot, and headed towards the forbidden forest, against which the village elders had already warned their children. There were many frightening versions of this evil forest. One version said that the evil spirits of the villagers held their meeting there, and other scary scenarios that words could not explain. Amina watched Madame G enter the forest. Why is she going towards the forbidden forest? She should know how evil that forest is, thought Amina, her mind troubled by negative thoughts. She followed Madame G, trying to walk on tiptoe to avoid being seen. Even as she walked quietly behind her, fear filled Amina's mind, with questions she could not ask Madame G directly. Madame G walked faster and faster, and Amina, following her, also quickened her pace not to lose her, and especially not to get caught. Amina opened her mouth, stunned. Witches really existed. She saw 5 women in ghostly black attire, gathering around a large hiroko, waiting for Madame G, who was still carrying the large pot she used for cooking for her clients. Amina quickly hid behind a mango tree. She watched the women exchange greetings and discuss with Madame G how she would share the money Madame G had earned from her food business and how to abduct more children in the community. Amina's troubled thoughts were interrupted by the crunch of dry leaves she had accidentally stepped on. Immediately, the women's eyes fixed on her. Madame G was furious, holding her large pot. Amina watched terrified as each woman fixed her gaze on her, interrupting their discussion. Out of fear of being seen and becoming a victim, Amina slowly took 2 steps back before running away, retracing her path out of the forest as quickly as possible. Arriving at the village square, still sweating and out of breath, trying to catch her breath with an expression revealing she had seen something extraordinary, she explained everything to the village king. But why did a poor orphan like you follow Madame G into the forest? Do you know the consequences of your actions, and if you had been possessed or worse killed by an evil spirit, are you sure of what you are saying? "I hope this is not a joke," said the king, adjusting his position on the throne, eyes fixed on Amina. He then ordered his guards to go into the evil forest to drive out the wicked women. In the forest, the barbarian women, including Madame G, were worried about the girl who had seen them and were discussing the possibility of returning to the village. Madame G then suggested staying in the forest, otherwise they would all be killed by the villagers because the little girl had discovered their secret. The guards began their journey towards the evil forest, accompanied by Amina to guide them. As soon as they reached the place where Madame G and her accomplices were hiding, the guards advanced towards them, pulled them from their hiding spots, and tied their hands like slaves, beating them severely. They saw all the children's clothes hanging on every tree and took everything. They dragged the women to the village square where all the villagers were gathered. The king was initially stunned to see the clothes of the children they had killed, then he spat on Madame G and her accomplices who had committed sacrilege. Some villagers who had eaten Madame G's food cried with regret, and the parents of the children Madame G had killed wept with immense pain. The king then ordered the villagers to stone them to death because they did not deserve to live. Thanks to Amina, who had saved the community, the king rewarded her for her courage. The moral of this story is to be careful about what you eat outside and to never kill anyone to replace an animal.